ICQ Podcast episode 329, Radio Questions Answered. Well, hello fellow amateur radio enthusiasts, and welcome to this, our 329th episode and also our 12th birthday of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast. Supported this episode by Daryl McCaffrey, Ed Sherfak, Whiskey X-Ray 2 Romeo, Andrew Wybrow, Mike 0, India Romeo Uniform, David Bowie, Ed Jones, K8, Mike Echo Juliet, Phil Heckinbottom, VK6, Alpha Delta Foxtrot, Dino Puppers, Kilo Lima 0 Sierra, Galen Truehall, and 2 anonymous donors, as well as our monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode, Martin M1MRB is joined by Dan, Kilo Bravo 6, November Uniform, Edmund, Mike 0, Mike November Golf, and Ruth, Kilo 4, Lima Alpha Oscar, to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BOY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is a feature where we answer your radio questions. Well, I'm sure you appreciate that the listeners who donate to the show keep our show advert free, and with our hope that we would look after us on our 12th birthday, we've got a little bit of a list to run through, but I hope you give us a couple of seconds just to run through their messages and to thank them properly for keeping your podcast advert free. So Daryl McCarthy, no message from you yet, Daryl, but if you want to send something in, we'll cover it on a future show for you. Ed, Whiskey X-Ray 2 Romeo, says congratulations for a dozen great years. Best to Martin and all the team. We'll get together soon. So I know Ed caught up with Martin earlier on in the year in London. Good to hear from you, Ed. Andrew Wybrow, Mike 0, India Romeo Uniform. Just says he wants to thank all the team for the brilliant podcast. Thank you very much for that. David Bowie, again, no message from you yet, but let us know if there's a message and a call sign for you to thank you properly. Ed Jones, Kilo 8, Mike Echo Juliet, says his message is simple. He hopes to see you all in Dayton in 2021. Wouldn't it be great if we could get travelling again and get these Hamfests on, Ed? So we'll certainly look forward to catching up again as soon as we can. Phil Heckenbaum, VK6 Alpha Delta Foxtrot, says, hi, Colin, Martin and team. Happy birthday to the ICQ podcast and hope for many more. He's just made his annual birthday donation. Still has fond memories of meeting some of the team 2 years ago at Friedrichshafen and also in London during his trip from Australia to Europe. He's heard Martin twice on Fusion last year and was going to call and say hello, but he was signed off both times to go do something. You might have been catching him just as the shift was starting or something like that, and obviously because of the time difference. He says, well, it would be great if we instigated another Zello chat with listeners, like we've done a while back. And I think this is something we just need to get organised and try and get done as well. Things are going well in Western Australia at the moment. So touch wood anyway, obviously with the unmentionable going on. He lets us know it's not terribly active on HF at the moment because of the terrible conditions. But he says thank goodness for D-Star, Fusion and DMR. He dabbles with those. Brought himself an OpenSpot 3. What a nice piece of kit. Also have a couple of Raspberry Pi hotspots, but the OpenSpot gets the use most days. He says best to all the presenters. So thank you, Phil, for your donation. Greatly appreciated. Dino Papas, Kilo Lima 0 Sierra. Says to he's popped along to his donation. Happy birthday to the ICQ crew. And as I say, Dino kindly let me know as well that I had a broken link in the email. That was really appreciated, Dino. I know people were a bit worried about pointing out mistakes, but that was an important one. So I really do appreciate that you let me know that, Dino. And so you've been a long-time listener and a long-time supporter of the show, and really do appreciate you continuing to help us out. Galen Truehall is also another donor. No call sign yet for you, Galen. And we've also had 2 anonymous donors as well. Now, guys, I know it sounds like we've had a ton of donations there and they are wonderfully appreciated, but as I say, unfortunately, the bills keep on coming. So we're going to keep the 12th birthday donation open for a little while longer because I know people like to get involved in that one, sometimes a show or two after, or they miss out on it first time round. So all you got to do is visit icqpodcast.com/donate. If you find value in what we do with the show, all you got to do is fill in one of the options on the form there and pop along a donation, and it is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much, everybody, for helping us out and helping us to celebrate our 12th birthday. Right, well, as I mentioned, these donations keep the show advert free, so let's get on now with the show. We're going to join Martin, Dan, Edmund and Ruth to discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur ham radio news, including the rebirth of Hf and foundation training success. As always, I really hope you enjoy.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to this episode of the ICQ Podcast, episode 329, and tonight's news roundtable for that episode. We are fairly short on the ground of presenters, but it's still going to be a good one. It's always a good one. Unfortunately, no Leslie tonight, and I couldn't even get Bill to impersonate him. He did enough of that the other night. So no Leslie, but I do have Mr. Dan Romanchik KB6NU.
Good evening.
Hi Dan, it's good to have you as always, and some interesting things you've been up to, but we'll touch on those a little bit later. Also have Mr. Edmund Spicer, G0MMG. Hi Edmund.
Oh, I haven't got a proper call sign that starts with G. I start with M. I'm one of these Johnny-come-latelys. Mike 0, Mike November Golf at your service. Good evening, Martin. Good evening, everybody.
And I failed miserably, but don't worry. The people do to me, they go GM1, and I go, no, I'm not a Scottish station. but no problems. Sorry, Edmund, I'll get your call sign right. I'm losing it. It's old age, mate. But somebody who isn't old is our Ruth, and we have Ruth back with us today. Ruth Willet, KM4 LAO. Hi, Ruth.
Hello, Martin, everybody. It's great to be back.
It's great to have you back, and we got you for a few weeks now. College is finished, I believe, so it's good to hear you, and let's hope all goes well with the college stuff. Right, our first news story. Successful foundation webinar. Now this is in the UK, and our colleagues at Essex Hams held a webinar for those studying for their amateur radio licence. Now since it's UK, I'm going to give it to Edmund first, but 258 participants. That's pretty damn good, isn't it, Edmund?
It is indeed, yes. Essex Ham strike again, and very many congratulations to Pete M0PSX for organising this. That's a huge undertaking. I hope they will have their microphones muted, because I've been on webinars where there's been a dozen people, and it's got quite unwieldy with people talking over each other, that kind of thing. So this looks really good. It's a pity there isn't a video of it on YouTube or that kind of thing, because subjects they covered included, amongst other things, waterproofing PL259s and using SDR dongles, both of which I would have really loved to have learnt about when I did my foundation, but that was back in 2009, and the world has moved on considerably since then. So best of luck to everybody who took part in that when it comes for passing the exam for the Mike 7 or Mike 7 or Mike Whiskey 7 or wherever else in the UK you happen to be. And there is a group on Facebook called M7, the class of 2020, nothing to do with Essex Ham, but if you are studying for the foundation or if you have recently passed it, I would recommend going onto Facebook and joining that group, because there's a lot of helpful information on there. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, no problems at all, and that's obviously interesting what you're saying there. Now, Dan, you're a teacher, the same as me, you teach the hobby. What do you think on this one?
Well, I'm actually really disappointed that this isn't on YouTube somewhere. I would have loved to see this. We talked here in the Detroit area about holding these kind of lessons, and we never got off the ground. But what the whole idea was to sort of pool our resources amongst the clubs in the metropolitan area, and then find teachers to teach these individual topics. And now it struck a chord with me to do this online. I think that I could probably organize a bunch of guys around the country, maybe even internationally, to do one or more sessions, and then you'd have a whole new ham kind of course. This would be great.
Yeah, I think this is the way that life's going to go. I know we're in a strange situation at the moment with lockdowns and things like that, but I think more and more people are turning to YouTube or other such devices and online things to see and learn. Now, the only concern I have is that I've got a pet hate, and if I ever get round to doing it, and I really ought to because I'm being badgered by a couple of my friends to do this, but I'm thinking of doing one on soldering because I see so many people soldering on YouTube that haven't got a clue. They might be making interesting stuff, but it annoys me intensely when I see somebody with a big blob of solder on the end of this tip and then just dabbing it onto the connector, and I'm thinking, you don't know how to solder. So if it's done properly, and I'm sure Essex Hams would have done, this is a good way to learn. And I agree with you, Dan. It could be interesting.
Okay, well, I'm signing you up to do the soldering module.
Okay, I'm more than willing to do that one. As I say, I've been thinking about do I do one big YouTube video or do I do a session on a number of them? But I think there's a fair amount to talk about that it will be worth doing as a one YouTube video, because I think, it's just silly. I see so many people making so many mistakes.
Yeah.
All right, Ruth, we've whittled on, but what's your thoughts on this one?
I definitely agree that online is the way things are going to be going for a lot of learning. I'm really glad to see a lot of ham groups are trying to adapt so they can ensure that we can continue successful license testing and studying throughout the pandemic. Even moving forward, I think it's vital for helping people get licensed. If they don't have time or don't want to show up in person, they can do it online. So this is an incredible turnout. I'm not surprised at all that it's from Essex Ham with the amount of things they've done for the hobby. And I'm thrilled that they had so many people involved and that it covered so many good topics so that these participants will hopefully be well equipped to take their license exam and get on the air.
Certainly. And as you say, there's a lot now happening online. I think it's going to be a good thing, and I think it should be used, the online stuff should be used with other things. It shouldn't be the only thing offered, but going forward, congratulations to Essex Hams. Please keep up the good work. And Pete, when I see you, we'll stand in the corner and giggle about all sorts of things as we normally do. Okay, moving on. 5,000 kilometres plus opening on 144 megs from Cape Verde Island to Europe on the 2nd of July. Now that's just over 3,000 miles. That is phenomenal distance on VHF. I'm going to pass it to Ruth first. What do you think, Ruth?
This is incredible. I love seeing how far they got to go on 144 megahertz. And personally, as I'm getting more and more interested in higher bands with both satellite communication and looking to push into 6 meters, I'm really interested in seeing the different openings that occur around the world. So I loved reading this story.
Well, the other thing is that when you're operating up at the higher frequencies, we're always told that these are the limitations. But every now and again, something happens in the ionosphere and your signal just goes that much further. And it's sometimes, for me, it's the wow factor that comes across with that. But yeah, I agree with you, Ruth. Dan, what's your thoughts?
Well, I'm going to make the same comment I made last time we covered a similar story. It's FT8.
Yeah. Well, FT8 or not, it got there.
I'm just joking. It's the same joke I made last time. Maybe it's already stale. But yeah, that's pretty cool.
No. Well, I think I was going to mention this at the end, but I'll mention it now. We had a listener write to us and say, I don't like the fact you guys are picking on me all the time. Therefore, I'm never going to listen to your podcast again. I think it might have been, and I don't urge Bill to stop, but Bill refers to it as FT Stupid 8. And he's tongue-in-cheek. Bill uses FT8, and he quite likes it. But the guy got upset. And Colin he was a bit upset because the guy didn't give his call sign, or he didn't, any way we could get back to him, just put it on the newsletter, the comment sheet on the website. Now, that's fine, but we always say people can have their say. If we've upset somebody, let us know. But in the same breath, the same day, I got an email from another ham who was absolutely gushing on how happy he was and what we said, and he loves the podcast. So you can't please all the people all the time, but there you go. So, Edmund, 5,000 kilometres, what do you think?
Speaking as a person who has never had an FT8 QSO on any band, and speaking as somebody who could really take it or leave it, I don't dislike FT8, but it doesn't thrill me either. With that as a background, I don't blame them using FT8 for this particular or these particular contacts for several reasons. Firstly, on 2 meters, sporadic openings are more fleeting than they are on the lower bands. I think I read somewhere recently that FT8 openings on 2 meters are like 10 times rarer than on 6 meters, because you need the sporadic E-clouds to be more strong in order to reflect the signals back down to the earth at the higher frequencies. So openings are likely to be rarer and shorter lasting when they happen. So if you catch one, I don't blame you for using a mode that will potentially get as many contacts as possible through whilst that opening is available. The other advantages of FT8 over CW or SSB: accurate signal reports, and assuming that false decodes don't come into the equation, with FT8, if it's on your screen, you can be as sure as possible that you genuinely work that station. Whereas if it's a CW or SSB contact that is absolutely borderline, there could be room for an element of doubt over whether you've copied the call sign properly or not creeping in. That, plus, as I've said, you're likely, unless you're very fast on the key, you're likely to complete more QSOs on FT8 in a given period of time than you are if you use CW or SSB. So as the podcast's non-FT8 person, I'm going to stick up for the people involved on this occasion. I don't blame them at all for using FT8 or FT stupid 8, as Bill would say if he was here. But the other really good thing about this is that there's more than one mode of propagation involved. I know from direct experience living right next to the English Channel that if you have got an intense marine duct going over water, that can be almost equivalent to a lossless waveguide, effectively. And the thinking is that one of those got the signal roughly as far as Morocco in North Africa, and from there was a single hop sporadic E jump into Southeast Europe. So it's a great achievement. Well done to everybody involved, but in particular to the station on Cape Verde. That's what's his call sign? I'd better give him credit for it, hadn't I? And it's gone off my screen. Delta 4 Victor Hotel Foxtrot D4 VHF. To be in the right place at the right time and have those two modes of propagation come together at the same time, and to have people at the other end to actually make the FT8 QSOs on 2 meters. It's not like he did this on 10 meters where you can get sporadic e-propagation pretty much every day during the summer months. For all of those things to come together all at the same time, he's a very lucky boy, and I tip my hat to him, and congratulations to everybody involved. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, well, I think it's good. And yes, I have done FT8 only on HMS Belfast. It was set up for me, and I was doing FT8 on the Belfast, and the guys were saying, come on, we're going home, and I got to 48 contacts that afternoon, and I was like, no, I've got to get 50. So I wouldn't go until I got 50. It's infectious when you do it, but I must admit, bit lazy to set it up at home. I've been doing other things, but yeah, it's a good mode if that's what you need to use. Moving on, this story came from Dan's website, The Rebirth of Hf, and I think Dan, you wrote a great article here. So over to you first.
Oh, well, thanks. So this blog post describes a new white paper from Rhodey and Schwartz, who are big on HF communication. And it's kind of two parts. The first part is sort of a primer on HF communications, and it's pretty well written, and folks might want to read it just for that. But then it goes on to describe a new application, and mostly for military communications, but describes a new, well, I won't even say new, but describes the way some military communication systems are now using HF. And they're sending data over 48 kilohertz channels. So part of the reason I wanted to put this on my website is to show that people are starting to use HF now in a lot of different ways. And, a couple of years ago, we're all thinking, oh, man, we're going to get more HF bands and life's going to be gravy on the HF bands. But I kind of don't think so. This is only one instance of an HF application that I've run across lately. And actually, we're going to talk about another one further down the show. And, we're going to have to be on our guard as much as any time in the past for bandwidth.
Yeah. Well, this is interesting because, as you say, lots of things are developing in the radio hobby, not just amateur radio, but radio in general. And as we move forward, you're right. We all thought we were going to get more bandwidth. We all thought we were going to get this and the other. But, okay, this is not in the amateur bands, but it's still radio and HF. And things learnt here, hopefully, we can learn from it and improve our communicating. Ruth, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, I mean, Dan covered a lot of what I was thinking, but I think it's a very interesting article with a good overview of HF. I enjoyed that in the first half. Personally, I was really interested in learning on just how the different modern communications are starting to use the HF bands, just because I hadn't read too much about that before. And definitely knowing we aren't the only radio people who use HF is important to, like you said, being aware and making sure we don't lose any spectrum.
Yeah, but also the PLT lines and things like that. If the military are using the HF bands, then some of the interference from PLT and things like that are going to get squashed because they got more power than we have to get that sort of thing squashed. So it could be an advantage to us going forward. It's just my thought.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's one of the silver linings anyway.
Yeah. So, I mean, you look at some of these stories and there's good and bad to all of them, but, I think it could help going forward because the military won't mess around. If you're interfering with their frequencies, you'll be told to stop. So, that's good. Edmund, what's your thoughts?
Dan raises an interesting point that I hadn't thought of, because if we were at the height of the sunspot cycle where even the higher HF frequencies were open sort of worldwide most of the time, then that's 30 megahertz worth of HF spectrum to play with. Because we're right down the bottom of the sunspot cycle, rather, any new activities that come along are going to be concentrated primarily in the bottom half of the HF spectrum, which will put even more pressure on the transmissions that are already there. So I can't really think of anything much to say, but yes, it's a good point that Dan raises that I hadn't thought of.
Well, these, a lot of these stories, as we discuss, are set to generate interest, generate thought. You know, we don't always know the right answers, but some of the stories we cover here would not necessarily be covered with your national body because they're not necessarily local.
Another thing that occurs to me here, talking about silver linings, is that with these new applications, it should lead to more research into HF phenomena, and that all should benefit us too. You know, there'll be more need for RF engineers and HF type engineers, and you know, that'll maybe be a boon. You know, at least a little bit of a boon for ham radio. You know, getting more hams in, making a case for ham radio as a way to get into HF, all that kind of stuff.
Well, it's. I was going to say an easy entry into HF, but it's not an easy entry. It's a very sociable entry into HF, getting a ham license, and there are a lot of people around with a lot more knowledge, and certainly I have, that are doing some very clever things, and you know, that proves that with a bit of luck, our hobby is not going to suffer. Unlike the next news story that I've got here, it said an uncertain future of ham radio, and it was an article written in the IEEE Spectrum magazine on the state of amateur radio in the US. Now, I read through this and thought, lots of pictures of well-known people, pictures of youngsters, general, but it don't fit with what I'm thinking. So I thought maybe I'm out on a limb. Then I read the comments at the bottom and found Dan had pretty much said the same as me. So Dan, I'm going to let you go first on this one again. A little bit of hooey, maybe.
Well, so I think what happened is the author of this article went into it with her conclusion already in mind. And she talked to a bunch of people and pulled some quotes that maybe or sort of kind of bolstered her already formed conclusion, and didn't really learn anything. First off, she didn't probably know too much about ham radio to begin with, and didn't learn much in the process. And so you get kind of a mishmash of comments that really don't reflect the state of ham radio. And I had a little bit of a laugh because, you know, one of the people she quotes in the article is Howard Mickle, the no longer CEO of the ARRL. And, you know, we all loved Howard Mickle. We had him on, you had him on the podcast. I had him on my podcast when I was still podcasting. And we liked his outlook on the ARRL. But having said that, there's a reason he's no longer the CEO of the ARRL. So I don't even think he was a good person to quote in the first place. So anyway, that's I could go on, but I'll let the others have a shot here.
Yeah, I think, as I say, she chose Harold Mickle. There's Martin Dew from MFJ mentioned in the article. But I just felt you have to have an open mind. And if you want to know what the state of the hobby is, you're going to ask a lot of people. And, you know, if for argument's sake, you could argue the hobby's dead because there's not many people doing PSK 31, for argument's sake. Just use that as an argument. 10 years ago there were 5 times the people using PSK than are now. But the hobby's moved on. There's still people using PSK, but they're doing lots of other things. The hobby is expanding every year with new things that are coming out. So unless you look at the big picture, I think you're screwed, Dan.
Well, that's what one of the commenters said on Reddit, actually. There was an item on Reddit about this. He said, well, she didn't even mention FT8 at all. So obviously she didn't really research the article.
Yeah, I think you're right. And as I say, I was pleased when I scrolled down into the comments to see you'd commented pretty much what I was going to comment on. So I suppose I was a bit naughty. I didn't bother to comment, but there you go. Ruth, what's your thoughts?
Well, y'all have covered it pretty good so far, kind of where I am as well. I mean, people have been saying ham radio is dying for years, and it certainly hasn't died out yet.
I said, you're an example of why it's not dying out.
Thank you. Like, there's people who are getting involved in all states of life, and just to say, blanket say that the ham radio is dying in the article, I don't think is accurate. I think it did make some decently good points, things we have to be considering and keep in mind, but like Dan was saying, like you were saying, Dan, it doesn't entirely reflect where we are as a whole in the hobby. There's so much aspects we can do. There's so much to do in the hobby, so much to explore, so much to learn, that even if we aren't communicating the same way we did 10 years ago, we're still enjoying amateur radio for what it is and learning more about what it can be. One thing I wish the article had talked about is they really only focused on like the baby boomers dying out and then young people. And again, it's important to focus on the middle-aged as well. I mean, I'm a younger person, and I love seeing how many young people are starting to get involved in the hobby. But like I've said before, I also think it's vitally important we get a little older, middle-aged people involved as well, people that are settled in careers. They have more money to buy equipment or more work experience to be able to do more tinkering and teach the younger folks how to tinker and how to build radios for themselves. And I think there's enough people exploring aspects of amateur radio and enjoying it that we definitely aren't going to be dying out anytime soon. And definitely not if I have anything to say about it.
I like your style, Ruth. I do like your style. And, you know, I come back to the youth are important to bring into the hobby. But everybody should have their say in this hobby. I was doing a presentation last night to a radio club. There was a gentleman there, well in his 80s, and the stereotypical 80-year-old gentleman on the radio is somebody who sits pounding the brass. Sorry, Dan, I'm not getting at Morse code, people, but somebody who just pounds the brass and everything else is not amateur radio. And this guy was talking to me about his Earth, Moon, Earth station and how he's got his tracking antennas up, and he does a bit of satellites and all those sort of things. And he's well in his 80s, and he's up for all the modern technology, and we had quite a chat. And to me, he's somebody young at heart that hasn't got a closed mind, that wants to know. And I think a lot of our hobby is benefiting from people that I would say are young at heart. And yeah, I agree, Ruth. We do need people like yourself in the hobby. And, you know, going forward, you're a great ambassador for that. But also, we do need others in the hobby to have an open mind.
Definitely. All kinds of people are welcome, and, you know, the more people we get involved, the more we can learn from and push the hobby in new directions.
And you guys over in the States have the term Elmer. And Elmer is somebody who can help or teach you something. But just because you're an Elmer on one subject doesn't mean you're an Elmer on every subject. You could have a technician class licensee who maybe just coming into the hobby but's got a phenomenal amount of knowledge on something that could Elmer an extra. You know, it's there. We have to realise that people don't always take exams for the sake of taking them. So there you go. I'm wittering on. Edmund, what's your thoughts?
Well, I wouldn't say that you're whittering on, Martin, because you've just said to a large extent what I was thinking. Anybody who contends that amateur radio is dead, sit them down in front of an HF rig during a major contest weekend and tune to 40 or 20 metres. And actually, it doesn't have to be a major contest weekend, some of the minor ones as well. And you'll see a band crammed with activity. So I don't think amateur radio is dying out, but even if I were trying to argue that it were dying out, the problem is what constitutes dying out. If you mean the number of license holders worldwide, then yes, that may be going down, and the average age may be getting older, and there may be fewer younger people coming into the hobby than was the case a few decades. But if you mean dying out in terms of activity, then that's a completely different question, because given the choice, if I could have a radio club that had 20 people in it, but all of those 20 people got up and did things and made things happen, or on the other hand, I could have a tea and biscuits radio club with 200 members, all or most of whom sat around doing not very much and never turning the radio on, then obviously I would choose the first club. So dying out activity-wise, irrespective of the numbers, no, I don't see that at all. And yes, of course, it's important to encourage youth and young people. And as somebody in his early 40s, I do still just about count myself as a young person. But they're not, young people are not the be-all and end-all. Yes, encourage them by all means, but older people as well, perhaps people who are recently retired, who were fascinated by radio in their youth, but then things like life, families, children, mortgages, that kind of thing came along and got in the way. If they've recently retired and have suddenly got a load of spare times on their hands, then maybe we should look or put just as much emphasis on tapping that vein of recruits as we should by concentrating on young people.
And if you call me granddad again, there's trouble, right? No, I'm joking.
Oh, I thought I got away with this.
Yeah, no problems. But yeah, I know what you mean. I suppose, and I'm going to just have a quick last word on this one. I suppose if you just didn't understand, 2 meters in the UK is a lot quieter than it was 20 odd years ago. The reason for it is that the foundation licence holders got given HF privileges. So they got another heap of bands that they could work on so that everybody's far more spread out. Whereas in the early days you had the B licensee who was only allowed above 30 megs, and therefore you were going to get more VHF, UHF. But hey, it doesn't mean to say there's less people in the hobby. They're just more spread out, and they're using the bands for the right reasons at the right time. Anyway, but we'll move on. Okay, Chris sent me this one, said we ought to talk about this, and I had a quick chat with Dan before we started. There's a proposed shortwave station going to go in Illinois, just west of Chicago, I believe, and it's prompting objections. Now, the shortwave station to me sounded quite strange because, first off, lots of shortwave stations are being shut down. They're expensive to run, they need masses of real estate, all those sort of things. But the other thing I suddenly spotted in here is it's running digital radio Mondale, which there aren't that many radio stations or radios that have that. But I know I keep going to Dan first on this one, but Dan, we talked about this, and you think it's more to do with the data that this station is going to move that the people are getting upset. So over to you, Dan.
Yeah, I think so. I think the religious and educational program is just a cover for the data. You know, I think we talked about this on a previous ICQ podcast where there was a experimental station beaming financial information from the U.S. to the UK, or UK, I don't know, somewhere in Europe, I think. And you know, that's just what they're doing. And I think they're using the cover of getting a license for general broadcasting as a cover for the data. I mean, maybe, and I don't know why. Maybe getting a license for data only is tougher. I don't know, but that's they're not. Let's put it this way: they're not going to make a lot of money on their religious and educational content, whereas the data will be the money maker for them.
Yeah, well, digital radio Mondale is supposed to be very high quality audio in the shortwave bands. It's also has a data stream along with it, so you can transmit other information along with the program you're listening to. And I think originally it was designed to show you who the presenter was, what piece of music's being played, the artist and the title and that sort of thing. A bit like they do on FM. Yeah, if they're transmitting data and only transmitting data, that's going to be a boring station to listen to. Hi. Edmund, what's your thoughts?
Yes, digital radio mondial, or worldwide digital radio for the English version, is an old technology now, by which I mean it's been around decades as opposed to years, and I thought that it had more or less died a natural, even in its heyday. I did hear a few DRM transmissions on long wave, medium wave and short wave, but even those were very few and far between, and there was only a handful of commercially produced radios that you would recognize as a radio set. So these days I would think pretty much everybody listening to DRM would be using a web-based SDR. Sound quality wise, it's all right. It's probably closest to DAB rather than FM in terms of sound quality. I have decoded it in the past. It's okay for speech, although the speech does sound rather unnatural. It's certainly no challenger to a good quality FM signal, and I certainly wouldn't want to listen to music being broadcast using DRM unless I absolutely had to, and I especially wouldn't want to do it if I was a hi-fi purist. So I thought it had more or less died out. I know some people in the UK do transmit it on 80 meters. I think there's a spot frequency somewhere around 3736 from memory, just above the SSTV frequency. But in terms of broadcast, I thought it had it. So this proposed transmitter station, they obviously mean business, because they're talking about beaming signals towards Europe everywhere from is it 5.9 megahertz up to 14.9? So the 49 meter through to the 19 meter broadcast bands. So they obviously mean business. You ain't going to get signals across those bands into Europe just by slinging a bit of wire up in a tree. So when I heard about this, my first thought was, if they're using DRM, there must be a reason. If you were going purely for broadcast, you would go for AM. There's plenty of religious stations in particular coming out of the USA on AM already, as it is. So I think Dan is absolutely correct. The ulterior motive here is the data that would be transmitted rather than the actual radio programs themselves. I suspect those would just be a means to an end. But beyond that, I know very little about DRM, really. And I know even less about this proposed setup in Illinois. So I will follow developments with interest. But yes, I think I'm minded to take the same view as that Dan does, Martin. Back to you.
Yeah, fine on that one. So, yeah, it's interesting, DRM. Ruth, have you done anything and tried to decode DRM, or do you have any thoughts on this station?
No, I have not tried to decode any DRM or anything yet. Really don't know much about this topic or this station, but I've learned a lot listening to everybody else, and I think you all have covered a lot of it pretty well so far that I can't really add too much. But it's definitely interesting, and I've learned something new today.
It's like this hobby, there's so many new facets coming along. I mean, when I first got shown at the club DRM, Digital Radio Mondial, the guys came down and they were experimental engineers from the BBC, and they gave a great presentation. But at the time, and this is nearly 20 years ago, the average price of the receiver was £600. Now, all right, they will come down in price, I know that, but at that point in time, the average price of the receiver was £600, and they were saying, Oh, this is great technology for third world countries, because we can send all sorts of data and voice and all those sort of things at a higher quality sound level. And you're thinking, yeah, but for first world country, not many people are going to send £600 on a receiver, a broadcast receiver, let alone a third world country that's got hardly any money at all. So I know the technology's moved on, but this is obviously being done for a reason, and I think, Dan, you're dead right. Data is probably where it's going to go, and if it ends up just transmitting data, it's going to be pretty boring. As long as they don't interfere with the amateur bands, I don't think many people will actually listen to it. So there you go.
What I'd like to see their marketing analysis.
Yeah.
Like how many listeners are they actually, to their religious, quote unquote, religious and educational program? How many actual listeners are they projecting?
Yeah, well, I could get naughty and say it's all to do with the fact that the UK's just banned Huawei from our 5G network, but that might be going some. Anyway, now let's finish on I kind of like this one. This is a nice news story. A DIY weather satellite ground station. And a couple of ladies, Sasha M6IOR and Sophie M6NYX, have been listening to the NOAA satellites and decoding the pictures of it. But it's not just that. There's a lot of nice things about this. Their beginner licenses, their foundation in the UK, the equivalent of a technician in the States. B, they're two young ladies, great in a hobby, followed on in Ruth's footsteps. And 3, they didn't just say, hey, look, we're downloading these pictures. They actually produced a website with a lot of information so other people could actually do it as well. So I think this was this quite excited me when I saw it, but I'm going to pass it to Ruth first. What do you think, Ruth?
I absolutely love this. I think this was my favorite news story of the week. Personally, I've been interested in the NOAA satellite images and wanting to start gathering them myself, so reading this was very informative. I just love how in-depth and detailed, but also easily readable the whole thing was. I love their whole list of hardware, so you can know exactly what you need and some options along with prices, so you can get a good price list going before you buy everything. They had good acronyms, the whole explanations of what they're doing and why were very spot on. And then the instructions were great. The pictures, the annotations, the steps of how to do it all, the tips, what you're supposed to be looking for, the screenshots. I loved it. It was very well done. It sounds like they put a lot of effort into this, and hopefully it'll be very useful for a lot of people, myself included. So it was great. Great news story.
And who said amateur radio's dead, eh? And the youngsters aren't interested.
Yeah, it was literally one of the best how-to articles I've read in quite a while. Very, very well done.
Yeah, I agree with you. Edmund, what's your thoughts on this one?
Yes, everything that Ruth said. Lots of hyperlinks is always good, and because it's a recent article, they will all be working, all being well. It's not like if you dig an article up from 15 years ago and find that half the hyperlinks don't work anymore. And the best thing about it was that they insisted, quite rightly, that if you're going to do this, you need a turnstile antenna or something similar. As I was reading it, I was thinking to myself, please don't suggest or recommend that people use a white stick collinear antenna, because unless you are exceptionally lucky, it will not work, or it will not work to any great extent. So when I scrolled down and they said use a turnstile antenna, I thought, yes, thank goodness. So as long as you do that and follow the instructions, you'll be fine, and you ought to be able to receive some of the Russian Meteosats with that setup, as well as the NOAA satellites as well. So yeah, big thumbs up from this end for exactly the same reasons that Ruth mentioned. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, and I think it's, I agree with both of you, it's a very good article. Dan, last words on this one.
Well, so I agree with both the other presenters. This is a great story. I'll just throw in a little bit of a other funny story here. About a year or two ago, I worked a guy and it was on CW, but his call sign struck a bell with me for some reason. His call sign was WBADQT, and as it turns out, this is Ralph Taggart, who, if you're of a certain age like me, is the guy who wrote some of the original articles about WeFax in, I think, the 80s, maybe 90s. And they were all interesting, and he did a really great job of it. And I asked him, I said, hey, are you do this anymore? And he says, oh, no. He says the technology passed me by, and I just gave up on it. But the reason I bring this up is, this is a case where amateur radio technology is advancing. Here he did a heck of a job back in the 80s on it. And now with today's technology, we can have, foundation licensees still put together a system that does even more than what Ralph was able to do back in the 80s. So I don't know. I guess that's just my take on the whole thing.
Well, the other thing is with a £100 or $100 or in that sort of region, somewhere between $100 and $150 SDR receiver with decent software, you've got a receiver that, I know you've got to plug it into a PC, but you've got a receiver that's the equivalent of something you probably paid, $2,000-$3,000 for 10 years ago. The technology has moved on, and with SDR you can do a hell of a lot more, which has opened up the hobby to other people. So things that which were becoming difficult because of the expense of the equipment now is becoming more cost effective to relook at it. So maybe that's it as well, Dan.
Yep.
Right, well that concludes our news stories. I hope everybody enjoyed them. I'm going to move round. Let's start with Edmund first. What have you been up to in the hobby, Edmund, since the last time I spoke to you?
Well, I've actually had a little bit of a break for the last couple of weeks. I went a bit mad on the International Museums weekend at the end of June and worked 100 stations on SSB, which is quite a lot by my standards over a weekend. And the highlight of that was that I went transatlantic. I managed to work a station taking part in the ARRL field day, got a 1D station in Vermont from memory, and had lots of nice conversations with people all across Europe as well. So since then I've been giving it a little bit of a rest. I might try scanning the shortwave bands to see if I can find a DRM signal, to see if I can decode it. The only one I remember hearing recently was on the 75 metre broadcast band, up at about 3955, 3955 I think it was. I've got half an idea that might have been Deutsche Welle from Germany, but don't quote me on that one. Apart from that, Martin, and attending a few online Zoom sessions with various clubs and people, I've not really done much with amateur radio at all, I'm afraid, Martin. I've failed you.
No, you haven't failed. We can't all be busy all the time. You have to recharge your batteries again, so that's no problems at all. And it sounds like you've been having fun anyway, so I don't know what you complain about. Dan, what have you been up to since the last time we spoke to you? I know you've been writing lots of articles, so but what else have you been up to?
Well, it's almost like what haven't I done lately? So field day, we did field day. I mentioned a little bit on the last podcast about my preparations, and boy, that really went really well. That was just a lot of fun. Even though we didn't have our big club event like we usually do, I got to do some other things that probably wouldn't have done otherwise. For example, I set up a solar panel and operated off solar power. and that was great. I operated QRP. And the thing about QRP, if you operate class 1B battery, which I did, I was operating off the battery, you get a 10 times multiplier for each. You get a 5 times multiplier, but since I made all my contacts on CW, that was already a 2 times multiplier. So I got 10 points for every CW contact. And so I made 225 CW contacts in 24 hours. And scored 2,250 QSO points, which is pretty good. Then in addition to that, so that was a lot of fun. In addition to that, I actually started teaching online tech classes. So because we can't do in-person classes really anymore, I've started doing online classes. And I've had a really good response so far. The first one we did in June, and we had 8 participants. I kept it small just to see how it would go. And it went pretty well. Everybody passed. And I started teaching another one on Monday, and I've got 28 people in this class. So it's working out pretty well, using Zoom and using the share screen feature. And it's going pretty well.
Well, I also know you did a talk for Denby Dale Club, and the RSGB ended up speaking to you, Steve Thomas, the RSGB, didn't he?
Yeah. So I did that as well. I'll reiterate to anybody else out there that would like to have me do this talk. It's about CW. It's called Having Fun with Morse Code. And if anybody would like me to give that talk to their club, they can email me and we can set that up.
And we enjoyed it when you did you talk for us a couple of years ago at Sutton and Sheen, Dan, so that was good. You also got a mention in Radcom. I know the boys sent you over the clip from Radcom saying that you'd done the Denby Dale one, so that was good. So, yeah. So let's see what Ruth's been up to. Now, Ruth, I've left you to the end because you haven't been with us for a while, so hopefully you've been up to a lot.
Definitely. Well, I mean, I had a very, very busy couple of months with an entirely online semester of college, taking 20 credits from, I guess it was April through middle of June. So in that time, I didn't do too much ham radio, mostly just a couple of satellite passes and club meetings as I could. But I've been off the last couple of weeks, so I've kind of been piling it all into the last couple of weeks to get all sorts of fun. Doing a lot more satellite passes, both at home and then when my family very carefully social distanced at the beach, which was also a rare grade on satellites, so I had fun. The neighbors weren't quite sure what to do with a girl standing on their beach at like 2 a.m. trying to talk to people. They were slightly confused, but I didn't care. It was fun. And then I've also been learning more about linear satellites, so slightly more complicated to talk through. But I'm getting better at it. Finally made some breakthroughs on both how I talk through them as well as my equipment. So I'm getting to upgrade my station. I'm getting a new battery so I can get my full power from my 817s, which has been a lot of fun. So that's exciting. I've also been learning more about 6 meters. One of my good friends, Sean, KX9X, sent me a 6 meter dipole that I am putting up and going to see what I can get so I can start to learn more about that band and try to make some contacts. And then, of course, I've been attending online club meetings, which has been really fun because I've been attending club meetings by Zoom or Skype or whatever for a number of years now when I can't be there in person. So it's just kind of fun to be at online club meetings where everybody's there online. So I've been trying to do as much as I can the last couple of weeks and looking forward to continuing that as I head into my co-op job and more satellites, definitely.
Well, that sounds absolutely great, and I know you're glad that you've finished the studies for the moment and you're having a bit of a break. Enjoy the radio, Ruth, and it's a real pleasure to have you back with us. We have missed you over the last few weeks, but once again, I did say to you, your education is more important than the podcast when you joined us, so that's good. From my point of view, what have I been up to? Well, not as much as most of you. Last episode I talked about making your own cat cable or making a programming cable box up with an FTDI module. I actually been playing, really, and I have been playing with an Alinco RX8 receiver, and that has cat control, and that can also be made into an SDR. It's a tabletop receiver, but you can make it into an SDR as well. And with my experimental board, I've been controlling the little Alinco receiver. Turn it into an SDR. You program it, tell it to be an SDR in the menus, and away you go. The software is written, and it's freely available from the Alinco website. Is not as fully featured as most people's software today, and I'm not knocking it because it is free, and this was really a matter of getting it to work. But I think, in fairness, that particular radio is actually better used as a standard day-to-day shortwave receiver, but proved it could be done. And there were lots of talks on the internet saying it was quite difficult to do. I didn't actually find it that difficult. My lead worked very, very well, and I say that worked from there. Been doing a reasonable amount of VHF stuff. Obviously I drive to and from work about 45 minutes, so I'm on a couple of repeaters plus some simplex. So you'll often hear me around in the South London, South Coast area. And occasionally I take a little handy talkie with me, and I'm able to make the local repeater about 5 or 6 miles away. In fact, I'm actually make 2 repeaters quite easily, so I sometimes on during the day when I talk very quietly when I'm supposed to be working. So there you go. Did a talk last night for the Dover Club on ICQ podcast, and it was interesting. Edmund joined me along with Bill, and I think we got away with that one. I think they thoroughly enjoyed it. Tomorrow, unfortunately, guys, you won't get the audio from this, but Sutton and Sheem have a after this podcast goes out, but they will have had a talk by Jim Lee, who's a BBC Radio 4 presenter, newsreader, but he doesn't really want us to rebroadcast his audio. So, fair enough, Jim, we understand that. But last but not least, I've also been doing a hell of a lot more with SDR. I've been playing with SDR stuff for the last couple of weeks. So, playing with the various SDR dongle things I've got kicking around and trying to get my head around what I'm going to use them all for. So, not much transmitting on my side, but more playing with receivers. So that's what we've been up to. Okay, guys, well, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining me tonight. And as I say, only 4 of us tonight instead of the 6, but I think it's been a good one. I'd like to thank Mr. Dan Romanchik KB6NU.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah, great to have you, Dan, as always. Mr. Edmund Spicer, M0MMG.
You have problems with that call sign, don't you, Martin? Thank you for having me on, and 7-3 to everyone.
Yeah, I am having trouble, mate. It's called Alzheimer's disease. And glad to have Ruth back with us, Ruth Willet, KM4LAO. Good to have you back with us, Ruth.
Thank you. It's been very fun being on.
No, it's great to have you all. Right, I'm going to say 73 to you all, and we'll move on to the rest of the podcast. 73, guys.
7-3.
73.
7-3.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
Now it's time to have a look at the news in brief with me, Colin M6BOY. Unfortunate news here. We start off with another Hamfest has gone. The UK National Hamfest, planned for the last weekend of September, 25th, 26th of September 2020, has been cancelled due to the coronavirus outbreak. The organisers have, as they tweeted the message, they've been closely following the ever-changing landscape, emerging government advice. However, they basically have considered the primary responsibility the health and welfare of everybody attending, and have come to the unfortunate decision to, as they cancel this year's show. To be honest, probably not unexpected. There was obviously great hope that it might go ahead, because we were hoping something would go ahead this year. But the more and more you think about, I suppose, the location, the amount of people in the hall, etc., is, social distance isn't going to happen. So I'd say this one was always likely to go, but it's sad news that that's now been confirmed. But as always, we hope, 2020 will come to an end with its negativity on us for our opportunity to go into Hamfest and meet up with each other. And 2021 will put us in better shape going forward for next year. So they're going to now work on next year's show, and fingers crossed that'll be, as good an event as it always is. The Summits on the Air program designed to encourage amateur radio, obviously based upon the Summits on the Hill Mountains in countries across the world to achieve their various awards, is going to be marked with an activity day on the 19th of September. There's 389 listed summits, listed just in the EI region. And I say there are lots of obviously spread out across the world. There are lots of SOTA groups taking part in this European event. So as I check out your local SOTA group for examples. But as I say, this is a potential good opportunity, not only for activators but chasers to also get themselves on the air on Saturday, the 19th of September, and get involved in the SOTA award scheme. Following on from the activities that are staying ahead with the Hamfest going, International Lightships and Lighthouse Weekend is planning away quite nicely. Now they've moved the event from the 15th of August, keeping clear those wanting to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the victory in the Pacific. So they're going to be going ahead on the 22nd of August. Already 222 entries have been received, and they hope that by the time they get around to the 22nd of August, 400 locations will be active for that weekend. So it's obviously great opportunity here. So far, just to give you an idea, Germany's leading the way with 54 entries, followed by Australia with 29 and the USA with 27. So if you've got a relevant location in your country, why not fill in the relevant forms and get yourself on air. As always, the link to this event will be on the ICQ podcast website, so you can check out either A, how to get involved, or B, obviously get it in diary to work those events on the 22nd and 23rd of this year. Right, now we're going to head over to our features episode, which is your radio questions answered. As always, guys, we really hope you enjoy.
And now what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast. Hi guys, for this episode's feature, I want to give out the information I've given out to a number of people over the last few months, in the form of questions being answered. Now, the ICQ podcast covers for all levels and knowledges in the hobby. And we can all be an Elmer, we can all be Elmered, and I openly admit I don't know it all. But wherever possible, I try and help newbies that have questions that they wish to have answered. So the first question I got was, how do I check whether X radio brand X is not causing interference with Harmonics? Now in the UK, Harmonics isn't covered until you get to the second license, the intermediate. Which is the equivalent of the general in the States. Now, truthfully, I can't remember when Harmonics come into play in the American syllabus. It was nearly best part of 10 years ago that I actually took mine, so forgive me, guys. However, we are supposed to check that our radios are not causing interference. So I'm not going to mention any particular manufacturers. Some of you will be disappointed with that. But let's do it generically so that anybody who's not sure how to do it will understand how to do it on any radio, and potentially ones they're likely to make. So, with harmonics, keeping the numbers easy, if your fundamental's on 1 meg, you'll have a second harmonic on 2 megs, third harmonic on 3 megs, fourth harmonic on 4 megs, and so on. Now, all of our amateur bands, or the majority of them apart from the walk bands, are harmonically related. So if you think about it, 80 metres, you say between round about 3.5 to 3.8 in the UK. The next band up, double that, and you're pretty much hitting the 40 metre band. For your second harmonic, would show up in the 40 metre band. Your third harmonic, once again, would be a little bit higher than that. So, how do we test to see if we've got harmonics there? Well, the easiest way for the lower frequencies is to use another radio receiver. So, as I said, you know that your harmonics are going to be multiples of your signal. So, if you're transmitting on 3.5 megs, you should not see a signal on 7 megs, because that's the second harmonic frequency. If you are, you have a major problem. Now, so you then know that your low-pass filter is not working sufficiently. And you can go 3 times and 4 times and see if you can see the third and fourth harmonic. Now, that's easy if it's fairly low frequencies. When I first passed my amateur radio license, a legal requirement in the UK used to be that you had to have a wave absorption meter. Now, these sound a posh name, but effectively they were a little bit more than a crystal set operating on higher frequencies, because I had mine for VHF, but I've also got one for HF now. And what you did was you tuned to the harmonic frequency, say twice the fundamental or 3 times the fundamental, to see if there were any output. And instead of outputting to a speaker as a radio would, or go quiet in actual fact if you're just transmitting a carrier, the wave absorption meter actually has a meter movement that shows the signal is there. So as you're tuning up the band, you then tune through where your second or third harmonic would be, and you don't want to see a nice spike on the meter going hard over and then coming back. They're the cost-effective ways of doing it. Now, most people would say today, oh, you need a spectrum analyzer. Great if you've got the starting point of about £1,000, you might want a spectrum analyzer, but you can certainly do it with a radio receiver or a wave absorption meter and have a look and see if you've got those harmonics there. Now, as we move forward in technology, a lot of people are using SDR devices. SDR devices are usually quite wideband, so you may very, very well be able to see the harmonics on your screen on the waterfall display. So if you transmit on a frequency and you've got your SDR tuned to the harmonic of that frequency, you don't want to see a massive spike. You might see a minor spike, but technically you should be at least 60 dB down in signal from the original. Much less than that, and you are probably breaking your licensing agreement. Now, there are, and I will give a plug for this, the SDR Play device, the software-defined radio. Some nice gentleman did write us a spectrum analyzer software. So instead of running up the SDR Uno to use it as a radio, you can actually run it up and turn it into a spectrum analyzer to see if you have problems. So that could be an option, a much more cost-effective option because the software is free. But once again, it's not a foolproof way of doing it. The spectrum analyzer would be your best choice, but they're expensive. The cheapest choice is another radio, and when you tune to that harmonic, when you transmit, you should hear it go silent. So if you have a large signal, or a signal large enough to make the radio go quiet. So that's a reasonably easy way to test your handy talkies and work out if they are illegal. Hi. Now, another question always comes up in my book is, why do I need a balun? Well, we tell you that a balun is for connecting balanced devices to unbalanced devices, but the question was, why do I need a balun? Well, in fairness, your radio has a 50 ohm impedance. Let's be honest. And a dipole, if it is at the optimum height, actually has got a input impedance of 72 ohms. So you've already got a 22 ohm mismatch on an absolutely perfectly set up dipole if it's the right height above the ground. Now, by moving a dipole at different heights above the ground, by drooping the arms of the dipole down, you can get close to 50 ohms, and in which case most of you would be fairly happy with that. But probably the more reason you don't want to exclude a balun is when you start running power, electricity finds the easiest way to ground. So you think of it, your dipole is up there, you've got your shield and your center connected, but coax actually has got three connectors, the inner of the shield and the outer of the shield, and you can get common mode currents flowing back down the shield into your shack. Now trust me, if you are not using a balun, you might very well get away with it at QRP, because there won't be much current coming back. And if you've been lucky and the way you've configured your antenna, you might be closer to 50 ohms, in which case you won't have a tremendous amount of current coming back. But you start running normal amounts of power, and you'll have current coming back into the shack, and you'll suddenly start finding that all sorts of devices with metal devices in your shack or the microphone suddenly become hot. And I've known people get a shock in the mouth of a microphone, a tingle when they touch controls or knobs and those sort of things. So just be aware of it. It is ideally required, and as I say, I wouldn't recommend you not doing it. Also, when you're setting up your antenna, you need to try and use the shortest cable possible for configuring the antenna. But the downside of that is, if your antenna is going to be sort of umpteen meters up in the air, the problem comes is, how do you do that? Because by putting a longer length of cable on, you're going to affect the SWR anyway. So wherever possible, if you can set your antenna up with a short length of cable, and that's why some of these portable SWR antenna testers work much more useful for yourself than a VNA, because you can maybe up your tower, setting it up on a short length of coax before applying a long length of coax. Now, next question I got asked, and I wrote the answer here. Do I need an ATU for Vhf and Uhf? And I wrote here, the short answer is no. In fact, at Vhf and Uhf, you should actually never use an ATU, because all they do is sync part of your signal to ground, and they're wastage. So you should be able to cut your antenna for resonance for the frequencies you want to use. That makes it far more reliable and less wasteful. And with antennas, the higher in frequency you go, the wider the bandwidth is. So In fairness, there's no reason why you can't get an antenna at UHF that will cover up to about 10 megs with a reasonable SWR, whereas a vertical, say at 80 meters, you might only get a few kilohertz. So for VHF and UHF, don't waste your money on a VHF or UHF ATU. There are people that sell them. Just cut your antenna to length and you'll be far more efficient, you'll radiate better, and you won't be wasting your money. Now, the last question, which I've been asked quite recently, is about dBs. Now, dBs are a logarithmic measurement originally designed by the Bell Telephone Company, and it's a way of calculating the gain through a system. We use it, and I have done a podcast feature on this. But when you pick up an antenna in a shop and you go, oh, this one's better than that one because it's got more gain, what are you looking at? Okay, let's be honest. Antenna manufacturers sometimes specify their gain as dBi and sometimes dBd. Now, dBi stands for decibel related to an isotropic antenna. Now, an isotropic antenna, as far as I understand, is a theoretical antenna. You know, it's the perfect antenna. So, it's got nothing interfering with it. It's fed with a 50 ohm load. It's an absolute perfect antenna, and it radiates 360 degrees like a big ball of radiation coming off it. So, dBi is quite a nice way. You can say, well, yeah, if I had a perfect antenna, do I have any gain over a perfect antenna? And in fairness, isotropic antennas should be 0 dBi. Now, enter the dipole. Our favourite little antenna, the easiest one to make. The dipole has a gain over an isotropic antenna of 2.15 dBs. So, a dipole at 2.15 dBi over an isotropic antenna. So your dipole does have gain. Often people say it doesn't, but it does have gain. The other one measurement that sometimes comes into play is dBd. And that refers to gain with respect to a dipole. So if I say my antenna's got a gain of 5 dB with respect to a dipole, dBd, then that's the measurement I'm working with. Now the problem is that manufacturers sometimes use dBi and dBd. So you can see very quickly that if I was a dipole manufacturer, I'd want to be quoting you gain figures of dBi and not dBd, because obviously 2.15 sounds much better than 0. So kind of, you have to work out which way they're trying to work with you. Now, so if you want to convert between dBi and dBd, it's a very simple of adding or subtracting 2.15 dBs according to the formula. So dBi equals dBd plus 2.15. So just check if one manufacturer is quoting in dBds and one's quoting dBi. You really need to be doing the conversion to make sure that what you buy you understand and you make sure you get the best gain possible. I hope that's been of use.
The ICQ podcast. Come for a moment. Stay for an hour.
Well, everyone, I really hope you enjoyed our feature there, Martin, answering your radio questions that have come into him over the last few weeks. And as I say, hopefully, as always, there's something for everybody, no matter what level you are in the hobby. Now, obviously, we've got a lovely long list of donors to thank in this episode. Darryl McCaffrey, Ed Shervack, Whiskey Echo 2 Romeo, Andrew Wybrow, Mike Zero, India Romeo Uniform, David Bowie, Ed Jones, Kilo 8, Mike Echo Juliet, Phil Heckenbottom, VK6, Alpha Delta Foxtrot, Dino Papas, Kilo Lima 0 Sierra, and Galen Drew Hall, along with the 2 anonymous donors as well. Thank you very much for supporting the show, along with the monthly and subscription donors. As always, if you find value in what we do and you enjoy an advert-free show, all you need to do is visit icqpodcast.com/donate, where whatever value you find in what we do and send our way is greatly appreciated. It helps us pay our bills and keep us advert-free. Now, as always, there's a few things you can do in coming days until our next show. Let us know if you're up to anything interesting or your club, about any events, etc. you're doing, and you can do that by visiting us and go to icqpodcast.com and click on the Get Involved section on the website, and that will show you how you can send in your news stories into us. You can also check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/ICQ podcast, where all the previous interviews we've done at Hamfest, etc. there in their video format. Sign up for the e-newsletter if you're not involved on the e-newsletter. Keep yourself updated with the news between our episodes. And you can also follow us on Twitter at Colin Butler or at M1MRB for all the latest news as well on the Twitter as well for you from there. Just like to also thank Dan KB6 November Uniform, Edmund Mike 0 Mike November Golf, and Ruth Kilo Mike 4 Lima Alpha Oscar for joining Martin M1MRB for the news roundtable in this episode. Great to have you guys on board there. Well, I say that wraps up this, our 12th birthday episode show. As I say, we're looking forward to obviously continuing on and doing many more in the future. As I say, it's been a fantastic time, as I say, working for you guys and producing this show for the last 12 years. And thank you very much for all you who have supported us along the way. So I'm going to bid you guys all, 73s, continue to enjoy the hobby. And we'll do this all again in a fortnight's time. 73s all.